2020 was one for the record books, and we don't even need to get into all of the reasons why. But one of the lasting legacies of the new decade may be the political awakening of a new generation of activists, agitators, truth seekers, and troublemakers. In the John Lewis vein, of course. Now, on the heels of the most consequential election of their lives, young New Yorkers are preparing to make their voices heard in the largest transfer of municipal power in recent memory. With 35 out of 51 seats in the city council, borough presidencies, the city comptroller, and public advocate jobs, as well as the mayor's office all up for grabs. It's that last job that brings us together now. Welcome to Future Voters, a Be Heard town hall presented by BRIC in partnership with NYC Votes, along with our organizational partners for the night, NYC Votes, the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development, YVOTE, Friends of Island Academy, Future of Tomorrow, Integrate NYC, the YWCA of Brooklyn, and Urban Word NYC. Tonight, 16 young people ages 16 to 24 will be heard as they dialogue with candidates running for mayor. Now, these young voices represent the present concerns and future viability of New York City. And throughout this evening, we'll center their voices while learning more about the people who would like to be mayor of the city of New York. Before we get to those voices, I'd like to introduce you to a very special voice indeed, SERENA Yang, who happens to be the 2021 New York City Poet Laureate, Youth Poet Laureate, that is. The floor is yours.
The poem that I'm about to share, I wrote in the weeks leading up to the presidential election when, despite being 19 years old, I was not eligible to vote. And in New York City alone, there are over 1 million non-citizens like me who do not have the ability to vote. And many of you here today may also be young people who aren't of voting age yet. So whether you're a non-citizen or you're under 18, incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, or if you simply face some of this nation's many systemic barriers to voting and civic engagement, there are a lot of us out here who can't vote, but that doesn't mean you're powerless. And I really want to emphasize this. Voting is just one kind of power. It's not everything. You can build power, you can exercise your power, you can organize in many ways. And today's town hall is a great example of that. And all that said, there are also many of us who can vote or will be able to vote soon, and including myself. And when we go to the polls, I hope that we all remember the people that we bring with us. This is seen at the local poll site. 5 days after I stepped foot into this country for the first time, I pledge allegiance to the flag. I put my right hand over my heart and say, I pledge, I pledge, I pledge. And in the meantime, the graves dig themselves. The bodies make their own beds. The dirt soils itself red and we call it fertile, land for the taking. My sister moves away to college and the flag still hanging at the front of my classroom calls me an alien. I become an aunt and somewhere the bombs are still falling. For 13 years, I open my palm and find only my own heart. Like you, I am afraid of many things. At a cafe, I sit across from a friend and I ask her when she's going to the polls. As I watch her consider her schedule, I wait. And I wait, even as the table burns between us and the cream-colored walls crumble to dust and the soy lattes and chai teas spill all over the floor. And why am I still waiting? Hand over my heart, looking so citizen-like, my Sunday best, my perfect English, my American friend, who, in a moment, will pick her chai tea off the floor and go vote. Thank you.
Thank you for that poem, SERENA, and also thank you for dropping that knowledge. We hope that everyone feels empowered and you'll be being reminded all night tonight of your power and the ways that we are all going to exercise it at the vote-in booth and beyond. But we are here to talk to some candidates for mayor, and right now I'm just going to give you a rundown of some of the people who we're going to be dialoguing with this evening, including Eric Adams, who was elected for Brooklyn Borough President in the year 2013. He became the borough's first Black leader in winning that election. We're also going to be speaking this evening with mayoral candidate Shaun Donovan. Mr. Donovan, who's there right now, great to see you, is the former secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. This HUD veteran was serving during the Obama administration. Thanks for joining us, candidate Donovan. We appreciate it. All right, we're also going to be expecting to hear from Carlos Menchaca. There he is, New York City mayoral candidate who's been serving as a member of New York's City Council for the 38th District since 2013. Great to see you, council member, candidate Menchaca. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Art Chang. Mr. Chang is the former managing director at J.P. Morgan Chase. Thank you for joining us, candidate Chang. Happy to see you this evening. And now we're going to be getting a look at Cleopatra Fitzgerald, who's a candidate for mayor, of course, and is a lifelong New Yorker. Thank you for being a lifelong member of New York City who wants to do something from the mayor's office. Her vision is to restore the broken system and reverse injustices. Glad to hear about it and look forward to hearing more as you dialogue with our young people. And I would like to introduce you right now to Bill Pepitone, who is a retired member of the New York City Police Department after serving over 30 years in law enforcement and public safety experience that he plans to bring to bear as the next mayor of New York City. Thanks for joining us, Bill. And now it's my pleasure to bring in Eddie Cullen into the room. Eddie's the founder of Impact USA and a professor at Purdue University. We look forward to speaking with you a little bit later. Thanks for joining us, Eddie. And now we are going to be meeting Thomas Downs, New York City mayoral candidate, of course, but Mr. Downs was also born and raised in New York City and is a graduate of Fordham Preparatory School. So thanks for joining us, youngest candidate in the room. And now Vitaly Filipchenko, who's of course a candidate for mayor and is a proud New Yorker, as we all should be as we head to the voting polls, and is also an immigrant and a small business owner who hopes to serve and represent the marginalized and the vulnerable citizens of New York City. Thanks for joining us. So a little bit about this evening. You've met some of the folks who would be New York City's next mayor. In this short time, each candidate is going to receive an equal amount of time in answering two different questions from our youth participants this evening. Now, the questions are going to cover a range of topics and issues facing New York City. The youth will ask their question of the candidate, and the candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond. Now, I'll be here keeping time and keeping everybody honest, making sure we keep this thing on the tracks. And after the candidate's response, we're also going to dialogue a little bit with the young person to make sure that they got the question answered to their satisfaction. So we're going to be going back and forth with the questions of the youth, speaking with the candidates, and it's going to be going in rounds. So please just sit back and listen to our young people as they dialogue with the candidates. First question of the evening is going to go to Gabby Knight. Now, Gabby has a question that is about policing, I believe. She wants to pre-register to vote and is a member of the YWCA, one of our partners in tonight's event. Hey, good to see you down there, Gabby, watching you on the monitor. So YWCA, of course, you know, is empowering women and young women, promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. She happens to be a YW leader at the YWCA of Brooklyn, of course, and her question is about remote learning. Gabby, you want to go with your question?
What are your plans to improve the remote learning space for students who may not have good internet connection at home and don't have the opportunity to have a positive learning environment?
So that question is going to be directed at Shaun Donovan, candidate Donovan.
Thanks, Brian. And before I answer Gabby's question, I just want to say to Serena how moved I was by your poem. My dad's an immigrant who grew up in Costa Rica and Lima, Peru, and came to this city for 50 years. He had a green card. And when I was in President Obama's cabinet, I got to be the keynote speaker at his induction ceremony on Ellis Island. And it was so moving. He was supposed to repeat the Pledge of Allegiance to all the hundreds of people becoming citizens that day. He was in tears and couldn't actually get through the Pledge of Allegiance. And so I was in tears listening to your poem. And thank you for reminding us what every immigrant knows is that we ought to be welcoming immigrants to this city, not like the last 4 years under President Trump. We should be making sure every one of us can live up to your example. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. On this question about internet and access, we know that this is not a luxury. This is a right for every New Yorker to be able to have internet access. If we didn't know it before, we know it now after COVID. Just today, I released a plan that would get broadband and internet access to every single New Yorker. I know from my experience working around the country that this is often a problem of the wiring and the hardware, but in New York City in particular, it's also the affordability of the service. And we need to do all three of those things. But before we actually get there, it's going to take some time to get it to everyone. We also need to be making sure that everyone can have access in their neighborhoods. And I'm a big believer that our libraries in particular are one of our most precious resources. So one of my proposals is to open every one of our libraries 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, to ensure that everyone, until they have the service they need at home, can always access it down the block in their neighborhood.
Serena Yang is going to be speaking with council member, now candidate, Carlos Menchaca. And she's asking this question on behalf of a young man who didn't want to appear on camera, but wanted to be heard all of the same, 17-year-old Trevor, who has a question that's going to be brought right now.
What do you think is more important to our city right now, building new homes and apartment buildings, or refurbishing and better utilizing our existing homes and stores?
This is an either or question, and so I'll answer that. When I think about the housing stock, Serena, that is here right now, like NYCHA, we have to build, rebuild, and reconstruct those apartments. I live in Red Hook, where I represent in Red Hook, and Red Hook East and West have, as part of the whole portfolio, $40 billion of deferred maintenance. That means that the city, the state, and the federal government have not been injecting dollars to repair homes, these public housing. And I grew up in public housing myself, so I know the power of what it is for a family to have public housing. I think that that is the first thing that we can do. If we had a choice of just doing one or the other, that's the first thing that we can do to show our commitment to the people who live in the city right now, who deserve that full promise of public housing. And I'm thinking about the stores question and really connecting it to this idea that our stores that are vacant in our streets right now, where businesses have closed, could become potential spaces for school. Imagine going down the block and studying instead of an environment that you have in at home that you can't study. Maybe you don't have Wi-Fi, maybe you don't have the right technology, but you can walk down to your local a local storefront that is still there. We can just refurbish it for a classroom space. And so that's how I'm thinking about this question. And thank you so much for asking it.
All right, thank you for that. We are going to be moving on to question number 4 right now. Michael is going to be speaking with candidate Art Chang. Now, Michael is 22 years old and registered to vote and comes to us through Friends of Island Academy. Now, they were founded in 1990 by a collaboration between education and social service staff on Rikers and community-based advocates who sought to address the recidivism rates, untapped potential, and disproportionate confinement of youth of color who attend school on Rikers Island every year. And Michael's question is about the NYPD's gang database.
Hello. My question was, because of the NYPD gang database base, a lot of our youth members are being incarcerated because they know or have been seen in a picture with people from their community. A lot of brothers who had promising futures had their opportunities taken away because instead of heading to college, were sent to prison just for knowing somebody within the city that's very compact. What are the plans for making sure the brothers who are not involved keep their dreams alive?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry that you've had to go through this. It's a terrible experience. And I'll just say on that front, I have the privilege of actually having worked, I've hired someone who was incarcerated at Rikers and as a teenager, and he never graduated from high school as a result of that. And I know how hard his life was, but he persevered and he taught himself Photoshop. I hired him as a designer in my company. And today, 10 years later, he is an employee at Apple Computer. So I say, never give up on your dreams. And as you say, this is a dream killer. So the thing that we got to do is we got to think about alternatives to incarceration. We got to think about using data, not necessarily about punishing people and actually using jail as a threat, but instead using these databases as a way to say, well, these youth, they need something that they're not getting from the system. We need to be addressing with them more holistically, saying, what is the issue here? What are you not getting from your environment? And we know usually what the things are: is poverty, lack of jobs, poor schools, bad housing. And so we need to use those kinds of things as ways to address the issue and not take promising young people off the street and put them in jail. I came to New York City in 1985, and I have seen the roundups on the street. I have seen the people go into jail. I've seen what happens to the lives destroyed, the families and the communities that are impacted for a very, very long time. We don't really take into account the full breadth and length of the problem that gets caused in our communities when we take people who have done no other crime other than association with the wrong people. And who among us hasn't actually occasionally come up with the wrong people and actually put them into the prison system? It's that jail to prison pipeline, instead of allowing them to be in their community and figuring out how to give them the opportunity to realize themselves and to achieve their potential.
Feel like you have clarity on the position from the candidate on the gang database?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for the question.
We're going to move on now. We're going to have RENEE MENDONCA speaking with candidate Cleopatra Fitzgerald. Now, RENEE is 18 years old and an identical twin. We'll be seeing her twin a little bit later. But she's a graduate of Susan Wagner High School in Staten Island and is currently attending the College of Staten Island Verrazano Scholar program. There she is, very proud Verrazano Scholar. And she's not yet registered to vote, but planning on being a registered voter before the primary, which is very important because New York City does not have same-day registration and voting. And she happens to be a member of YVOTE and has a question about opportunities for immigrants in America. It's all yours.
Hi. So America has always been a dream country for many students worldwide, and it still continues to be the best countries in the world. And New York City comprises of immigrants. So my question to you is, what is your vision for immigrant students in America who aim to pursue a better life in the US? And what opportunities do you want to include that will benefit the immigrant population?
Good evening. First of all, I would like to say it's a very, very honor to be here today. And also I would like to thank SERENA Yan for her poem. We are all immigrants' blood here. And it is very difficult when persons are discriminated because of their color, because of their language, because of their religion. It was a fantastic question also posed today. I will make sure first that the school system accepts the students and do not discriminate them in the classrooms. Also, for example, we have to reform ICE, that people do not kill, do not threaten the immigrants, or for example, when they are having babies, that they don't force them to miscarriage and do not let them have children because they are putting something on their food, and many things like that. It starts with the schools, it starts with the system, it starts with checking every law, each policy. And if persons do not fix it, then it will never be fixed. It will only be empty talk and hypocrisy. Because there are a lot of politicians that have many years in office, but they are immune to the voices of the people. I am not silent. I am always here for you. And I will be the voice of the people. I will be the voice of the immigrant persons who every day wait for an opportunity, for a chance to live the dream, to speak the truth, to have the liberty not taken away from them, but always to be looking forward and not die, but live.
Thank you for that response. You think we can move on, Renee?
Yes, thank you.
No, thank you. So our next question is going to be from Benji Weiss to Bill Pepitone. Benji's 14 years old and attends the Brooklyn Collaborative Middle School and is a member of Integrate NYC. And Ben has a question about integration in New York City schools. It's all yours, Benji.
My question is, how would you tackle the issue of segregated schools in New York City? And more specifically, how would you tackle the issue as pertaining to resources, restorative justice, relationships, representation, and enrollment processes?
Well, first, thank you for your question. It's an excellent question. We have to remember that New York City is the most diverse city in the country, the most diverse city in the United States of America. And we have to keep our arms open to everyone, to all races, colors, creeds, religion. That's what New York City was built upon. And that's what New York City should still stand for. I'm against segregation. I'm against incorporating everyone, as I said, all races, colors, creeds, incorporating everyone, giving everybody the same opportunities, the same enrollment opportunities, the same learning opportunities. Every opportunity that is available here in New York City should be open to everyone. Where the days of us being a divided city, which has happened over the past year or so, we need to end that. We need to bring everybody together, people together. And I talk about opportunities. So important for our young people like you to be given every single opportunity to thrive and to grow academically, to grow socially, and to really take advantage of everything New York City has to offer. This city offers everything, or has the potential to offer everything as far as education. We have to be able to make sure our young people like you are given the opportunity to take advantage of it.
All right, thank you for that response, candidate. What did you think about that, Benji? Can we move on?
Yeah, I like the response, especially it was very good on the resources topic.
All right. Points there for you, candidate. Now we're going to be speaking with Lauren Weisberg, who has a question of Eddie Cullen. Lauren is 18 and she's from Staten Island and goes to Port Richmond High School. She is registering to vote before the primary and is a member of YVOTE and has a question about police reform.
As you know, there have been a lot of concerns about policing in our city. I'd like to hear more about specific reform ideas that you have. Could you envision creating more specialization within the police force, for example, with more of an emphasis on social work? Also, would police reform include limiting or removing police in school? Thank you.
So for me, this is a personal, I think, response for me. One thing I do think we need to have police around. I think for the pure fact of 9/11. So I think some of you are young to not have been around for when that situation happened, but I ended up losing a brother-in-law, ended up losing about 75 people that I know that are very close to me. So I do think police presence is very important for terrorism situations. I think second, I was actually on the train right before where the A train Ripper was on the train, and I unfortunately saw the incidents in which someone was physically harmed on that train. And I will actually take the A train in about 2 hours from now. So my own physical safety, I think, would be on the line. Do I think we need police reform? Yes, but I think we need to go about it in a certain light. I think we need educational integration. So one of my ideas is to open up empathy labs, which would be a virtual reality empathy center where we would actually have community experiences and NYPD experiences shared with one another. I'm a technology entrepreneur, so I'm trying to integrate that. I do think we should take police officers out of schools. I don't think that is appropriate. I do believe that we need more mental health programs. So as an educator, I actually volunteered on $85 a month after college, working and living with the homeless. I walked through the desert with no shoes on to simulate what it was like to be a migrant. So I think we need empathy experiences to really know how the community and NYPD can engage with one another.
All right, thank you for that answer. What'd you think of that, Lauren? Were you satisfied? Did it get to the heart of your question?
I was partially satisfied, but I would like to hear more about specifically specialization within police force. I wasn't sure if you meant specialization or if you just meant all police officers would get this training.
So just for clarity, Lauren, what do you mean? How would you define specialization so we can make sure to get it answered fully?
I meant more there being specific police officers to answer mental health crises.
All right, so that's the question right on the face of it, Mr. Cullen, specifically with dealing with mental health and emotionally disturbed person responses.
Yes, I think we need specialists for mental health responses. So I think we do need specialists or social workers to go work with mental health. However, if the situation escalates, I do think there should be NYPD or police officers on tap, just in case something turns violent or there's a situation where someone's is in physical harm.
All right, thank you for that full answer. Now I'm looking at Khalil Lunsford of Khalil Lunsford is going to be speaking with Thomas Downs. Now, Khalil happens to be a member of Friends of Island Academy and is 22 years old and has a question about programs to help teens stay off the streets. All right, it's all yours, Khalil.
Hello, how you guys doing? My question is, what programs can you fund that will help teens stay off the street? That's my question.
I do that in New York City, we have a lot of opportunity to ensure that our youth is properly vitalized and using proper resources to keep off the streets. I think more community centers and especially improvements with the yards in public schools, especially around low-income areas, to have youth programs like basketball leagues, football leagues, baseball, along with computer sciences and other types of clubs to allow youth to come together in a common good and help to have extra hours outside of school where they're off the streets, along with the possibility for them to have somewhere to go on the weekends and be able to go out, hang out with people, and kind of build their own character that way.
All right, Khalil, how are you feeling about that? Do you think your question was fully realized?
Yes, I feel like that was very well said. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Permission to move on? Now, I'm going to be asking a question of Vitaly Filipchenko on behalf of a young man who was from Adhana Pan from the YWCA of Brooklyn. And she'd like to know, what is your plan to help children who suffer from mental illness or who are struggling to get through school?
Okay, first of all, it's a big problem in New York because all this dividing program, all this divided the school. Some richer school got better program, better financial. We have to focus. We have to be all the schools equals. We have to stop all this testing system and have to focus to spend more money for all this to resolve this problem. Like, for example, I'm not agree, we can't find money. All these candidates try to get matching programs and already got millions. City gonna match these programs. I'm so pissed off. These millions have to go to kids who really need it. We don't need the matching. This taxpayers' money we're spending for running program. No, give us some kind of budget, 20,000, whatever. But stop giving millions away for matching program for all these candidates. This money can help all these kids. And I have to speak up all this problem because most of them just running, I will help. No, I'm a guy who doing it. I'm get all this experience. I know how it hurts all these kids. We have to help them, not just like jabber, like speaking perfect English and help. No, all this matching program, millions. We got big funding, millions. Why don't want to help real problem to solve real problem? That's my big positive energy to help reality, not talking and you like promise better future. No, we have to do it. When you do it and help and work with kids and ask them what kind of help they need, that one can fix this problem. Not just like from me, I will do that and that. No, real connection for all these kids, for all the parents, they can give you better advice. They need all this resource team to spend tons of money. That's my answer.
All right, thank you for that answer. Now we're going to be moving on to 17-year-old DARIEL Infante. He is graduating this year and not yet pre-registered to vote. I'm sure we're going to take care of that as he is a member of Future of Tomorrow. And they're an organization that's led by students from the Franklin K. Lane campus high schools who are dedicated to improving education so that all students are provided the resources, environment, and opportunity needed to succeed. And his question is about police in schools.
Thank you. My high school is a great place because it's a place where newcomers to this country can start a new life in the big city. It is the place where we feel safe, where we feel familiar, but our school could improve with more funding for more mental health support, students' activities, and other necessary resources. The DOE, City Council, and Mayor Bill de Blasio are spending $450 million on school policing and the criminalization of youth of color, instead of investing for students in a school like mine. The school-to-prison pipeline affects many Black, Hispanic, and Latino youth by exposing them to the possibility of deportation in our criminal justice system. Will you commit to the vesting from the school safety division budget and invest in mental health support, restorative justice practices, and more public school funding for our NYC schools?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I think that all of our agencies, including school safety officers, we should move unnecessary funding, find more efficient ways to do so, put it in more support systems. It's amazing that we don't require counseling in all of our schools, from elementary school to middle school to high schools. I think it's imperative. I have invested in many of the full wraparound services, community-based schools, partnering with the UFT. And, I'm really happy with the almost $160 million that I put into our schools and to give that additional support. And so the goal is to make sure that we always have safety in the school. That's very important. Public safety is a prerequisite. I don't want our young people ever to be in an environment that is unsafe, not only from students in the school, but people who lurk around schools. and attempt to harm students. Everything from sex trafficking to gang environment. We need to make sure that the school buildings are safe, but at the same time, our focus should not be on heavy-handedness. It should be on making sure you have those support services, such as self-care, meditation, yoga, mindfulness. I send teachers away to learn meditation, yoga, and mindfulness in Brooklyn so they can show you proper self-care as you do your internal healing to deal with some of the trauma of just being a young person every day, as well as in the Department of Education. And so I say yes to that. Let's use our money wisely to be proactive and not reactive and give the support systems inside our schools.
All right, are you satisfied with that answer? Can we move on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So we're finishing one rotation here. Patrick Rahim is up, and he's going to be in conversation with Shaun Donovan, excuse me. Patrick is 22 and lives in Queens and is registered to vote. We'll see you at the polls, and comes to us through the Friends of Island Academy, and has a question about building more community youth centers.
Good evening, everyone, and I thank you for this platform. Shout out to BRIC and everybody is on this call in this Zoom meeting that has something to say about their voicing their opinions and their concerns. And I thank you for giving me this platform to be the voice of the youth today. On behalf of Friends of the Island Academy, where I serve as the youth mentor for the Queens location. And the question that I have for you guys today is, when are we going to build more youth centers, and what are your first steps into building these youth centers? Because I've spoken on many platforms before this with Columbia University and a couple other places, but I haven't seen anybody give me a correct answer or what I would like to hear as moving forward on this specific policy and my voicing my concerns on this specific topic. So the question is, when are we going to build more youth centers, and what are your first steps into taking into that?
Well, Patrick, thanks for the shout out to BRIC. My son's a musician who has played at BRIC. I live in Brooklyn, and I love the place. So thank you for that shout out. I also want to tie this question to something that we talked about a few minutes ago, and all the money we put in, not just to policing, but to our criminal justice system. Because to me, the idea that we spend far more on incarcerating kids than we do on uplifting them is a fundamental part of the problem. And I want to ask you a question. Do you know how much we spend per prisoner in our correction system in New York City? Just take a wild guess, per prisoner per year.
I believe it's maybe around 50,000, maybe. That's just a guess.
Over $400,000 a year.
400.
Over 400. And we're not getting great results from it, right? So my proposal is that not just by removing police from our schools, stopping them from criminalizing homelessness, I would create an alternative 911 system, and changes to our correction system, I would get to spending $3 billion a year, with a B, on community-oriented programs by the end of my first term, including youth centers, right? And I just want to give you one example. When I ran housing in New York City, I had housing vouchers, right, that helped people find an affordable place to live. We gave them to folks coming out of Rikers, and a year later, 95% of them were stably housed, getting back to work, and hadn't reoffended. Imagine what we could do if we weren't just doing housing, but actually youth centers, all of the other ways we could keep guns off the street, really investing in community-oriented programs like youth centers. We could transform our criminal justice system and create a lot more hope in this city. So keep going to BRIC, keep fighting for our youth centers, all right? Thank you.
So did we break the streak, Patrick? Did you get an answer that approached something that was complete for you?
definitely said he's putting billions into it, and I'm gonna hold him to that one.
Well,
Hold me
400,000
accountable.
versus
Hold
the
me
billions.
accountable.
You heard the man say, hold him accountable. Maybe you'll get a job out of this, candidate Donovan. All right, we're going to be moving on right now to Justin Liriano. He's going to be asking a question of candidate Carlos Menchaca. Now, Justin is 17 and attends Quest to Learn High School and is not yet registered to vote, but his history teacher is trying to get the class to register. Good luck with that. June 21st is his birthday, and he's going to turn 18 the day before the mayoral primaries and happens to be a member of Integrate NYC. So all that build-up, we got to get you registered to vote, Justin. He's got a question about increasing educational resources and creating more equitable education opportunities. Go for it.
Thank you so much. And I would like to say thank you to all the candidates who showed up today. You are greatly appreciated. But the coronavirus pandemic has shown the disparities between people in different class structures. And so my question to you today is, as mayor of New York City, how would you seek to increase resources and funding for impoverished communities to ensure all students receive quality education and equal opportunities to succeed?
Thank you, Justin. And I just want to say thank you to you and all the youth that are here today asking these really important questions. And this one is one of those questions that has really brought focus on an issue of inequity around the city and the state and the federal government around bringing funds to communities that have been neglected for years. These are communities that were impacted by COVID. These are communities where people are dying at faster rates. And when we're looking at the vaccine, when you look at white, affluent communities, you have more vaccinations happening there versus the communities of color, working families. Those are the communities that need. So how do we do that? We're also in a situation where the budget is getting smaller, which means that we're cutting a lot of our very vital programs, which means that we're going to have to defund the NYPD. The NYPD is a bloated budget, and I'm a city council member right now, so I get to review and pass the budget. I voted no last summer because we did not adequately defund the NYPD, and I think we can get to $3 billion. That means that we actually have cash right now to actually build out programs that bring healthcare to communities, adult literacy classes. We need to make sure that we get youth programs. SYEP was cut by the mayor last year. Those are things that we need to put in this next budget, but we can't do that without actually removing the bloated nature of the NYPD. And so part of this is also ensuring that when we talk about resources, we think about our schools. And you had questions. You all have had questions about how we bring more resources to schools. And there are so many schools right now that have PTAs in places like Park Slope and Upper West Side and East Side that have $1 million budgets in their PTA programs. How can we compete? We can do better by bringing more resources to communities that don't have that kind of resource. And so that's something that needs to be bold, and that's something that I will do. And I represent a community in Sunset Park where I hear constantly that they need not just more program money, but more capital improvements to things like the gymnasium and the theater. And that's something that the schools need, and that's something that the mayor can do.
All right. Thank you for that answer. Justin, how's that sitting with you?
It's sitting great, actually. I remember last summer I had emailed, I think, some of my representatives to vote no to, or on the budget, excuse me. And so hearing that you understand and acknowledge the fact that the police budget is overbloated and needs to be reduced is a very good thing. So thank you, and I appreciate it.
I heard you. Thank you.
Look at that. You're writing to electeds. They're hearing you. The system works if you work it. All right, we've got 6 more questions in this round, and I'm looking at Tasfia Shaun. Tasfia Hassan. You're going to be speaking with Art Chang now. She is 16 years old and attends Benjamin Banneker Academy High School as an 11th grader and is a YW leader, of course, member of the YWCA of Brooklyn. And her question is about COVID-19 vaccine distribution. It's all yours.
Thank you. As you know, we are currently in a pandemic and we have thousands of people waiting to take the vaccine. What is the plan that you'll implement for New Yorkers waiting to get the vaccine?
Thanks for that. I've been to Benjamin Banneker, by the way. It's a wonderful school. My son goes to Brooklyn Tech, and I'm on the school leadership team there. So it's a data problem, in my view. Like right now, it seems truly unjust that we are asking individual New Yorkers and asking people who actually have language differences and who don't all have access to technology to go on technology sites and actually do the work of queuing up and finding a spot, a reservation. And this actually is one of the ingredients to explaining the racial disparities in the vaccine distribution so far. What needs to happen is the city actually has all the data for the people who are eligible for the vaccine. We know where they live. We know where they're distributed across the city. We know how much vaccine we have. And so why isn't the city just automatically matching that? Why don't people get a postcard in the mail to say, your turn is coming up? And then if you're older, you actually get a phone call maybe to remind you. And yes, you can have technology to do this. But the question is, if you have the data at the very bottom, we know where everybody is and we know where the pharmacies are, why isn't distribution more equitable, more seamless, and more automated?
Those are worthy questions. Does that get close to satisfying your curiosity there?
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
thank you for the question.
Now we're going to be joined by 16-year-old Aisha Jaz, who's going to be speaking with candidate Fitzgerald. Now, Aisha attends school here in New York City, and take it away from Brooklyn Lab School.
Thank you, Brian, and good evening. Today I'm honored to be here to ask my question to one of the mayoral candidates. And hats off to BRIC TV for providing us students and youth with this amazing platform to share our concerns. One of the beauties of New York City is its diverse population. As an NYC high school student, I would like to see different cultural backgrounds and their history reflected in our textbooks and classrooms. Culturally responsive educational curriculums are very important to me. It is important that we learn about the history of minority communities that shape NYC beyond the media's portrayal of Muslims and other races, ethnicities, and cultures. We must educate each other to appreciate diversity and dispel all notions of biases and xenophobia. As a Muslim high school student, I'm curious to know, Borough President Eric Adams, how do you plan on expanding culturally responsive education to reflect Muslim history and culture in NYC? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum to you. And I think it's important to develop the full personhood of children and young people and young adults. We have to stop merely schooling and start educating, because we sit in a school building and we call that education, and it's not. And I see, as what I'm doing now with my Breaking Bread Building Bonds initiative, it is an initiative that calls for 100 dinners throughout the city, 10 people at each dinner. Each one comes from a different ethnic, religious, and cultural background. And know what it does? It forces us to do something that we don't do, talk to each other. We have to start communicating with each other. And we need to be intentional in our schools to make sure that we use not only technology, but face-to-face. We should have interactions with you, a meeting with people across the city, across the entire different neighborhoods to interact. And then we need to have books look like the students that are learning. We need culturally sensitive information, reading material, and step outside the school building, like what they're doing in the Bronx, one school district. A Latin mother takes the entire classroom on tours throughout her community to visit some of the churches, the mosques, the different important locations, telling people the names of streets. We need to look at how many streets we have named in our community that's reflective of the Muslim community. And so it's about being intentional and understanding that this is not an English speaking one culture city. And that's what I have done in Brooklyn, where 47% of the people speak a language other than English at home. I have fostered the relationships and tearing down some of those traditional barriers that don't allow us to enjoy the joy of healthy discomfort of learning from different people and fostering those relationships.
All right, thank you for that answer. Are you satisfied with the direction we got there?
I'm really satisfied and thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
All right, we appreciate that. We're going to be moving on right now to an exchange between Rhea Mendonca and candidate Cleopatra Fitzgerald, to be clear. Now, Rhea is an 18-year-old graduate of Susan Wagner High School in Staten Island and is currently attending Staten Island as a Verrazano Scholar. Congratulations. You're not yet registered vote, but we know you're planning on doing it, you and that sister of yours. So you have a question right now that's coming up. Go for it.
What steps are you going to take to stop the spread of COVID and to address the impact of the pandemic on young people? High school and college students' mental health is deteriorating as we are unable to face any face-to-face communication with our teachers and peers. Also, people are out of jobs as so many businesses have shut down due to the pandemic, making the job forecast frightening for young people. How will you support us in moving forward?
Very great question. First of all, right now, there are some sectors that are working very well. For example, tech. There's also the food industry. There's also the hospital industry that's faring very well. We know that the vaccines are not, sometimes there have been bad effects. People have died, unfortunately, from the vaccine. But as we have throughout all these years moved forward, example, World War II, and we still fought and won whatever infectious diseases, whatever wars, we will come back. I believe precaution has to be distributed by pamphlets, brochures, but not only by that. We have to make sure that people are keeping those regulations. So it means they have to wear protective gear and also penalties for those who are disobeying. For example, there are many police officers who died because they were not obeying or because they were contacting people that had COVID-19. So unfortunately, a lot of firemen, a lot of policemen died, and we could see the detrimental effects of all those populations that died. We have to also check each country and how they also are faring to see the poorer countries that are more negatively affected. For example, our neighborhoods, we know that those with poor education, poor access to gloves, to masks, perhaps we should give free masks, free gloves to people, but it will take a lot of money from our budgets. Each time, each administration says, we don't have the money. So the problem is the budget, trillions of dollars, and where all that money is being wasted in. We have to check each sector to see what is the fallacy in it.
Thank you for that answer. How do you feel about that response?
Very satisfied.
All right, very satisfied. We'll take it. So we're going to be moving on to one of the final questions now, just a few more in this round. EAHQUAN CLEAVES is going to be speaking with Bill Pepitone, and is not yet registered to vote, but plans to register, and is coming to us from our partners at the Friends of Island Academy, where he is working as an intern and lives on Far Rockaway, Queens, and has a question about the New York City Administration for Children's Services.
All right, my question is when and my fault. Who am I asking this question to?
I'll be speaking with candidate Pepitone here.
All right, thank you. When and how will you help deal with the irresponsibilities of ACS and mistreating troubled youth?
ACS is such an important agency in New York City. Dealing with children, dealing with families is such a important job and such a tenuous job. They have to make the right decisions. They have to make quick decisions in a lot of cases, because if they make a mistake, it can cost lives. It can cost lives of children. So we need more oversight with our ACS. They need to be held more accountable. And as mayor, I will make sure they are held accountable. We need more case reviews. We need more follow-ups. We need to make sure that the children and the families that they are checking in on and are investigating are being properly investigated, and to make sure that the results are in the best interest of the children. Too often, we turn our backs and turn a blind eye to some of the horrors that are going on, and we turn a blind eye to a lot of ACS's shortcomings. And we can't do that. It's costing lives, it's costing families. So again, as mayor, I will make sure that we have complete oversight, full oversight, fair investigations, and most importantly, very, very thorough follow-ups to make sure the job was done correctly and in the best interest of the children and the families.
All right, oversight and follow-up there. What do you think of that?
Thank you. Yeah, that was a good answer. I'm satisfied with that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Now I'm going to bring Alexa DeFilippis into the room, who's going to be speaking with candidate Thomas Downs. Now, a 16-year-old student at Brooklyn Tech, not yet registered to vote as a 16-year-old, but still a member of YVOTE, an engaged member of the community, future voter here, and has a question about the SAT exam.
Actually just pre-registered to vote, like I think 2 weeks ago.
All right, not mad at you.
So a controversial education topic from the de Blasio administration was the issue around the SHSAT and how to make admissions to high schools more just. Even though there was a lot of discussion around the topic, there wasn't really any change about the test, and it still continued, and it was even administered during a pandemic. What is your opinion on the SHSAT? And if you were to become mayor, what steps would you take to ensure that all students have equal opportunity to be granted admission to the specialized high schools in New York City?
Well, Alexa, I want to thank you for your question first and for pre-registering to vote. I am someone who also pre-registered to vote, and I recommend everyone who has the opportunity should. Any standardized test, I think, has the opportunity to create an unequal system, especially when it comes to wealthy students versus students who may be from more low-income families. Wealthy students typically have the ability to hire tutors and have study partners that are not accessible to all of New York City. And for tests like the SHSAT, I would recommend that we not only make more programs available for more students to have more of an equal opportunity to learn to take the test, but even possibly eliminating the tests altogether, because it is something that creates boundaries for all students that may not have the same type of opportunity. I would recommend more of a holistic review for students to gain admission, especially into New York City specialized high schools, and to eliminate testing procedures, because at the end of the day, it's something that can not only be unfair, but something that is also challenging for certain students who may have trouble focusing or just in general are nervous test takers.
Yeah, very controversial with lots of voices weighing in on that. But how does that answer sit with you?
It's mostly well. I just had one follow-up question. When you say holistic review and you're talking about holistic review for the specialized high schools, what exactly do you mean by that? What do you mean, what would be the criteria that you'd be talking about for that admission to the specialized high schools?
Well, I would be looking at more home environment, grades, of course, and extracurriculars, but none of those three things alone would determine a student's eligibility. I think that grades are an important factor, but the biggest factor for anyone's education is home environment. And that is something that deeply needs to be looked at, because there are inequities within home environment, sadly, throughout New York City. And that is something that can really cause a detriment to student learning.
More clear?
Yes, thank you.
All right, we like specificity here. Let us know your intentions. Now I'm going to go back to Mia Payne, who is going to be talking with candidate Eddie Cullen. And we've met Mia before, and she has a question about criminal justice reform.
Hi, I have a two-part question. So my question is, when focusing on criminal justice reform, how do you plan on eradicating police misconduct and building trust between the police and communities of color? And how will you test an officer's beliefs and values to ensure that they don't align with white supremacy? And will those same tactics be used when evaluating the systems of the structures of other systems such as healthcare, education, et cetera?
Yes, so I do think some of these systems are, there's institutional inequality, and I think it goes back to the 50s. So what I mean by that, we lost the garment industry in New York City. NYCHA, I think the police system, I think healthcare, all the systems were not proportionally built for every single person in New York City. So I would actually do a lot of at the ground level, so meaning longitudinal studies of students through their years in terms of education. And I'd also start integrating certain programs into police training. So that goes back to my empathy training and education with police officers when they enter the force. I think we need to have CUNY programs where police officers learn about the community and the community learns about police officers. And I think from a criminal justice standpoint, we need to look at all of our systems from bail reform and how we process data and having algorithms that are built for every single individual and not just a small group of people. And I also think we need to just look at how we are evaluating through a community accountability perspective. If you break the law as a police officer or you break the law as a community member, you need to be held accountable to your actions. And as a mayor, I would have to be held accountable as well. So I think we need complete community accountability from every single person within the process. And to start my administration, I would take the first 6 months and do something where I would bring all stakeholders from the community together to come to some sort of established methodology where we have a public safety coalition. So individualizing how we approach every police officer in every case, making sure we hold every single person accountable and make sure we hold the community accountable as well. So I think we can do little things, maybe whether it's the New York Police Department to the New York Police Services. There's so many things that we can do that are small but great at the same time, because language matters. I think accountability matters, and I think how we approach these situations to understand every stakeholder's perspective will arrive us at the right conclusion.
All right, Mia, what did you think? Did you get a full understanding of that answer?
I was satisfied with the answer. I do have like a small follow-up because you did answer the second part of my question, but even like after the reform and everything that was so great that you mentioned, how do you plan on getting communities of color to still like trust the police and not be hesitant about calling them when they're in need of trouble, when they're in need of help?
Yeah, I think one thing that we have to do is have an open communication platform. So one thing that I plan on doing is using a two-way Amber Alert through your iPhone or your smartphone. And then community members can actually access the police or access community services in a seamless way. So I think having engagements, whether it's breaking bread or having meals with one another within every community. And I think community members should have full access to police officers in their community. And I think we'd be surprised to find out that some police officers are incredible people who are here to serve and protect us. And there are going to be some bad apples. It's just the way it is in life. And we have to keep those bad apples accountable. So.
We all good? I'm waiting for you, Mia. You okay? You can release us? All right, so this is the final of the questions for this round before we have an open dialogue between the youth and our candidates. And I'm going to ask this of candidate Vitaly Filipchenko. It's a question that I'm asking on behalf of Kyla James from the YWCA. And she would like to know, how do you plan on breaking the poverty trap?
Main question. I'm gonna have to focus because precision question was, I want to just get a little bit, because I was volunteer for auxiliary cops for 3 years and next door precinct, because most of the cops say, why are you doing this next door? We can get threat. No, because we have to change the system, because right now the NYPD cannot work in the same area where they live because it's a law. If we get involved all these police officers who can work where they live, Because if you're doing something wrong, the community gonna shame him. Because right now, if you've done something bad, he go into his different community, nobody care what he's doing it. I work in my community because I've given back to my community. And if I've done something wrong, I know will be shame my community, because can see me next day on the street, they can say like, you bad person. I think we have to change and focus on main stuff to change this law. All these officers allowed to work in the same community, get more involved, better know each other, and we can resolve all this problem with the black, brown communities. Because if you live next door and you know what's the problem in your community, I think it's the main question. Instead dividing police and the community, we have to unite it. We have to live together and work together. Stop dividing. It's my main issue, because it's a #1 question in New York right now.
And how do you think that's going to feed into eliminating poverty for New Yorkers?
Poverty, obviously, I don't have enough answer for this information, because I barely got invited 30 minutes ago. I don't have enough time to prepare, to be honest. I would like to skip for now these questions.
All right, you've been heard. So that is the end of the questions for the candidates by the youth. So I'm going to invite everyone into the room now. It's going to be, if the technology gods are with us, I'm looking at a lot of wonderful faces right now. Thank you all for being here again and really giving voice to so many of the concerns of the people who are going to be going to the polls, and some of us who are even too young to vote, but never too young to be political and active and organized and in touch with the people who are making the decisions that help shape our city. So this is an opportunity for open dialogue, and I'd sort of like to flip the script now. I know that a lot of the candidates get invited to a lot of things, and many of you were at lots of things already this evening. It's a long road to the mayor's office. And in the service of that marathon, not a sprint, I wondered if any of you had questions that you would like to ask of the young people who are in the room. They've been asking you such great questions all night long, but I wonder what insights you would like to gain and take advantage of the young people in the room. So I'm looking for hands down here, any indication that any of our candidates. Mr. Donovan, I saw your hand go up first, and Mr. Chang, I see you over there. But Shaun Donovan, you have a question you'd like to pose to the young people in the room?
So, Brian, I want to start with something that I've learned over my many years of working to rebuild communities in New York and across the country. One of the things I've learned that I think we have to change in New York is that you can predict the life chances, even the life expectancy of a kid by the zip code they grow up in. And so I've proposed completely changing the way we plan our communities to turn them into what I call 15-minute communities. And that means that within the front door where you live, you should have everything you need to get ahead, to have real opportunity within 15 minutes of your front door. So my question to the students is, what's the thing they would most want to have within 15 minutes of their front door that they don't have right now? What's the biggest thing they're missing in their lives close to home?
So I'm inviting anyone who wants to answer that to unmute for us right now. Within 15 minutes of your house, you got an impact zone there where you don't have to travel to be enriched. What should be within that 15-minute span of you opening your front door? Come on, people, 15 minutes from your front door. What do you want?
I think,
there you
go. I think something that would be important, especially now, are, I don't know how it would exactly be facilitated, but places where social workers can meet with younger children. I think something that the pandemic has certainly spiked and possibly caused an epidemic of sorts is the decline in mental health of students. I know that it has been very drastic for so many kids who were so academically inclined to now be trapped in an environment where, you know, they have other responsibilities that just aren't school related, whether it's taking care of their siblings or doing the chores. And so I think having those mental health facilities that are easy to access for them, that can allow them and give them the space to kind of express their grievances and get any help they need, whether it's therapy or anything of the sort. I think that's very important in today's climate.
Thank you for that. That was really insightful and something we can never talk enough about, the mental health burden, especially as it relates to young people now. So jot that down, Candidate Donovan. I'm looking at you, Candidate Chang. You had a question there? Bring it to the young people.
Yeah, I did. Thank you so much, and for the opportunity. So I look ahead pretty far into the future, and I think, to the year 2100, when your children will be alive and the seas will rise by 10 feet. And then I work backwards from that, because that will actually put hundreds of thousands of homes underwater, and it will put all of our power plants, our wastewater treatment plants, our airports underwater, and reconfigure the city. And so from where you guys sit right now, do you think this is too early to think about this problem? And do you think that the candidates for mayor should actually be thinking about how to address these climate changes ahead, given the radical transformation this might have for the city, and actually to maybe realize that 15-minute community that Shaun likes to talk about and I admire? So just would love to hear what you guys think about that.
I definitely think that climate change and the impacts of the climate crisis are something that are, is there an echo or is it just, okay, are definitely something that are a big priority, at least to me, because I know that when you look at all the, you see all the, like you look in the news and you see all the science and you see all about like how soon relatively we have to solve this, it is very, like it feels, even though it is 2100 is a far away year, it's not comparatively, like the history of the earth, that's not that far away. And I'll also say, I think that we saw with like the climate march and a lot of students walking out, it's not an issue that feels necessarily like small to a lot of people, that it is an issue that is very close. So I do think that it is something that if like that I like personally is something that I really want candidates to address. And it is very important to me that they include when they talk about their plans for New York City. Well, what are your plans to address the climate crisis? Because that is something that we will face in our lives, especially given that New York City is right on the water, and something like rising sea levels is, I live right by the water, like something like rising sea levels is definitely going to impact our city. It's going to impact everywhere, but particularly our city. So that is, I definitely want to see plans towards that included.
All right, thank you for being heard on that subject. Now, I saw Eddie Cullen's hand go up, and I saw Carlos Menchaca as well. So the floor is yours, Mr. Cullen, and you're on deck for next candidate, Menchaca.
So this has been a topic of conversations with students that I've had over the last couple of months. Ages 14 to 24, do you believe that your age group should be paid as interns rather than unpaid work? And if so, is there anything that we can do to make that happen?
So you're asking if they can make getting paid happen?
Or saying,
yes,
what is their perspective on paid
I'm going to
internships?
answer for the young people in the room. Yes, they think they should be paid for their internship. And I'm going to ask you how we can make that happen with the permission of the young people in the room. Yes?
Sounds good to me.
Taking the permission. So how can we pay young people for their internship opportunities?
Absolutely. So I think we should have public-private partnerships where we work with organizations like Microsoft, Google, or startups like Genius, and then build a curricular framework where we actually train teachers to work with industry and then actually pay those students through those corporations. I think one model that I really like is Cristo Rey. So I think having an opportunity for students to work maybe 1 day a week, or actually be in school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then do that work. So I think we can do public-private partnership model where students are actually paid as interns. And I think it's important to me that students are paid for their work. So they're not volunteering. And I think there's a little bit of a gray area with that around a number of different states. So I think interns should be paid, ages 14 to 24. And I think we should really rely on the skills of the youth. I think they bring a lot to the table. So that's
so speaking of bringing something to the table, I saw Gabby's hand go up. Enlighten us, Gabby.
I actually have a question, but I also have an opinion about the paid internships. I think that students should be paid for their internships because we're not adults as yet, but we do have some responsibilities. Some people do want to have independence where they can pay for certain things by themselves. So with the opportunity to have a paid internship, you will be able to understand how to manage money and what it actually feels like to have your own money. And I have a question. What do you guys plan to, oh, you can't hear me?
We're good, we can hear you.
What do you guys plan to do to have more communities have access to fresh fruits and vegetables? Because a lot of people do not have access to this.
I got to answer.
Well, I would say quickly,
I know that's a
I think
passion
food
point
insecurity,
for at least a few of you in the room. Is there any person in particular you want to direct that question to as our time is waning?
No, I would like to hear from anyone.
So fresh fruits and vegetables, no more food deserts, no more food swamps. We want to advantage everyone with the opportunity to eat their way into good health. And I saw your hand go up. Who is it? So just
Can you hear me?
Mr. Menchaca.
Well, I think Vitaly was going to go first, and I'll come right after him, if we can keep it short.
Yes, thank you. First of all, these kids want to get money. We have to, from city, created community gardens who get training the kids to help to create all these foods. They can grow it and they can learn how to grow it and they can make extra money because they can sell it for own community, healthy food, all this organic stuff. It's a win-win situation. You learn, you make money, and you support your communities with fresh fruits. I think it's to be on the city. Stop focusing right now on a big corporate like Apple or whatever, get job with it. No, we have to give the money and help the small community. Don't focus on big corporate. Focus small community. City can pay you for learning. City can help you get veggie food and all this organic food. Stay to community. Stop spreading out. That's my opinion.
That's an innovative idea, getting young people employed in community gardens, paying them for their work, and making sure that food stays in the community and circulates. It's an idea. Councilmember candidate Menchaca, to you.
Yes. So I want to just address the food desert issue. I think this is partly a conversation around grocery stores. Grocery stores are closing across the entire city, and the city has been trying to figure out how to bring incentives to essentially bring more grocery stores. And so I think there's a lot more we can do there, and then ensure that the current grocery stores have good access to vegetables and fresh vegetables that are grown in the neighborhood. The idea of growing more in our neighborhood is important, and that's something that can happen through our schools. But the other piece is we just passed a piece of legislation in the council where we can actually bring more permits to vendors, so that vendors can actually bring those fruits and vegetables to directly to you, without having to have a brick and mortar like an actual store. We can have more vending, and so really working with all of you to make that happen. And there's this other great program with Grow NYC, and you can reach out to me afterward, where youth actually run and learn how to the business of running a market, a fresh fruits and vegetables market. And that's part of the things that we're funding at the city council to bring the concept of business into communities, but allowing the youth to manage it. And so those are all beautiful ideas that can bring all of those things together for you.
Thank you. That's your minute. And Mia, you are going to get in there with one of the last questions of the evening as we're running right up against our deadline. Or comment, Mia.
I have a question for Mr. Thomas Donovan, because you mentioned like the inequitable home situation. So my question is, like, one of the obvious issues that like is flooding New York City is homelessness, and I feel like it's painfully visible when you walk down any street or like get on any train. And as someone who goes to school in the city, I've noticed that some New York's poorest and wealthiest neighborhoods are like a train stop away from each other. So my question is, what policies will be formed to provide homes, jobs, healthcare, and mental health services to those who are most vulnerable to the effects of homelessness? And how will you involve socioeconomic equity within all of your policies regarding New York City?
That is a big question in 60 seconds, Mr. Donovan. It's Shaun Donovan.
Absolutely. So the way we make sure we have equity in every policy is appoint the first ever chief equity officer for New York City that reports directly to the mayor. I would do that. I pledged to do that on the very day I announced to run. And I got to say, Mia, I am so moved by your question. When I was your age, growing up in this city, I saw homelessness exploding around me, and it made me mad. And I started asking myself, how can it be that we let homeless people sleep on our streets? And that put me to work. I started volunteering in a homeless shelter. You should go do that. I started working for the National Coalition for the Homeless. And guess what? I ended up running the homeless strategy for President Obama. And we made huge progress. And you know how we did that? We did it with something called supportive housing. It's much better than shelter. It's much better than sleeping on the street. It's housing that combines mental health services, substance abuse. It was invented here in New York City, and we don't have enough of it. And instead, we're spending $3 billion a year on shelters and hotels, but it's not working. We have to, I like to say all the time, we have to reimagine our right to shelter as a right to housing in New York City. I learned how to solve this problem across the country. We can do it here if we reimagine our right to shelter as a right to housing.
All right. Thank you for that. That is actually going to be just the end of this forum in this form, but we encourage you all. I know there was some questions and some hands that were up. Why don't you meet us in the Twitterverse or online so we can continue to hash this out? This is a generation I feel comfortable saying, let's take this online and we can continue this dialogue and make sure that you hashtag #BeHeardUs so we can keep up with the conversation. As I said, this is the end of this forum, but this is just the beginning. There are some 100 and I want to say 14 days until you get to choose your choice in a new and exciting way with ranked choice voting. We want to thank all of the candidates and all of you out there, and we encourage you to reach out to the candidates through their social media, and clips from this Be Heard Town Hall will be shared with Civics for All so more students can see this program during Civics Week, March 8th through 11th. Thank you to our partners at NYC Votes and all of our organizational partners, but a special thank you to the young people. You are the future viability of this city, and our primary is June 22nd, 2021, general election to come on November 2nd, 2021, and we'll see you at the polls. Bye now.